with the first game, and that is Ole Miss dominating Georgia. Number 16 Ole Miss beating number 3 Georgia 28-10. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the Ole Miss Rebels. Their highest grade player, and really a lot of their highest grade players, are on the defensive line. Xavier Harris, 93.3 grade. Jared Ivey, 90.5 grade. Princely Iman Mielen, 81.8 grade. Jaden Kennedy, the cornerback, 77.5. Walter Nolan, the D-tackle, 75.5. Their 5 highest graded players all came from the defensive side of the football, with 4 of them coming on that elite defensive line, and then Jackson Dart rounding it out at a 71.9 grade. Let's go over to Georgia with their highest graded players in their loss to Ole Miss. Starting off with Warren Brinson, the D-tackle, 85.8. Another D-tackle there, Nazir Stackhouse, 76.6. Edge defender Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins at a 73.4. Linebacker CJ Allen, 70.4. Jalen Walker, another linebacker, 70. And then Carson Beck with a 67.2 grade. So, Dawn, for you, what was the stat that told the story in this Ole Miss victory?
So it's been one of the more surprising things, although they brought in plenty of pieces in the portal, right, like Iman Mielen and Walter Nolan. This Ole Miss team is a defensive team, first and foremost, right? And we've seen the offense kind of come and go, and it kind of came and went in this game. You know, they had stretches where they were good. They made enough plays. Jackson Dart threw a lot of shorter passes, moved the chains. They didn't have Trey Harris again in this game, which we thought might hurt them, but they've had success the last couple weeks without Harris. I got to focus on this defense, though. As a team, an 86.6 team defense grade. That's their second best this season, and the only team they were better against was week 1 against Furman, an FCS opponent. It's actually their second best against a Power 5 team in PFF history. We've been tracking college since 2014. It's the best since 2014. It was during 2014, I believe it was a game against Tennessee, was the one game that was better. So this is actually, by the grading, their best defensive performance in the last 10 years. And Georgia, 10 points for them it ties their lowest total under Kirby Smart. This is just up front, this front 7 all year for Ole Miss. You saw it with 4 of those 5 guys in that graphic there. This front 7, this defensive line specifically, has been dominating teams all season. They have not had a bad defensive effort all season. Even to me, the loss to LSU was about their offense taking too many shots and putting their defense in bad spots. This Ole Miss team, they're getting the offense rolling now without Trey Harris. They're finding what works, the shorter intermediate throws, right? When they get Trey Harris back and their offense now is fully loaded and their defense continues to play like this, and we have issues here with Georgia's offense too that you're getting into. Georgia's not equipped to play with a defense like this, but when it's Georgia versus Ole Miss, we've never said this before. There's very few teams that can score on Ole Miss right now. There's so few of them, and maybe, just maybe, because of this defense carrying them through some hard times, and even though they have 2 losses, and now their offense has started to figure it out the last 3 weeks, maybe Ole Miss is getting hot and maybe starting to play that elite football we thought they would in the preseason.
They really do look like it right now. We had Ole Miss as a number 4 in our preseason ranking, I believe, and they are starting to prove it right now. And we were kind of worried about them once they suffered a couple losses, but now, I mean, they are rolling. And really, my set to tell story kind of goes into that as well. Georgia had negative .403 EPA per pass. That's the worst since the COVID 2020 season for the Bulldogs. They averaged 5.8 yards per pass attempt, 3.4 air yards per completion. So what that means basically is every completion Carson Beck had was basically 3.5 yards downfield. They were not getting anything downfield against Ole Miss. And listen, Beck wasn't great, 62.6 passing grade, but honestly, the surrounding cast was even worse. They had a 56 receiving grade and a 50.9 pass blocking grade. It was their worst pass blocking grade all year against Ole Miss. Nothing went right in the passing game for them. And honestly, the one thing that Georgia had to rely on all year in their passing game, with Beck kind of struggling and having basically nothing in the receiving core that really scares defenses, what they had, though, was an elite offensive line protecting Carson Beck, which allowed him to get time back there and find receivers, open receivers, eventually, because obviously, no matter how bad your receivers are, you know, one of them is going to get open if you give them enough time back there. And that's how their passing game worked, honestly. But when you don't have the elite pass protection, then the receiving core struggles. Beck struggles as well. They just don't have the weapons right now. They don't have a Brock Bowers. They don't have a Ladd McConkey right now. And you can clearly see that. And if your offensive line is not dominating like they've been all year, they struggle. And Beck is really bad under pressure as well. And Carson Beck, we've seen time and time again now, Dalton, he is a quarterback that needs an elite supporting cast to succeed. Last year, when he was like a top 5 quarterback in the country, he had Brock Bowers, he had Ladd McConkey, and he had an elite offensive line. he didn't have an elite offensive line today, and he hasn't had, those kind of weapons all year, and that's why you're seeing Carson Beck go from a projected maybe top 10 pick of the NFL draft to out of the first round, maybe out of the second round altogether.
Yeah, no, it's just he doesn't – we've seen by now without McConkey and Bowers that he doesn't do enough to create – for what this year I think we could consider subpar weapons, right? I mean, we've got 2 or 3 tight ends who none of them are anywhere near as good as Bowers, who's maybe the best to ever do it in college. You lose Ladd McConkey, who was your number one guy. You have Dominic Lovett and Dylan Bell and some other guys, but they've played average football all season. And is it right? Does Georgia lead the nation in drops?
I think they do.
If they don't lead the nation, they're somewhere near the top. I mean, it just shows you this offense is not the same. And I'll be honest with you, you mentioned all those numbers and against Ole Miss. It doesn't get any easier next week.
No, Tennessee's defense.
Tennessee's defense is just as good. I mean, the
secondary's even better, I would say, than Ole Miss.
You could argue it, yeah. I mean, and you got James Pierce Jr. coming off the edge. You got all those defensive linemen playing well. I just.
And without the way that Georgia tackles played yesterday against James Pierce Jr., that's trouble.
I mean, you have reason to believe they may only score 10 points again next week playing like this.
Georgia is 81st in receiving grade right now, tied with Charlotte.
Yeah,
81st in the country. in receiving grade.
I mean, it's been the same problems all year. They don't get open. The pass protection has been good before this game, but this was an elite defensive line.
Yeah, they're still 15th in pass blocking grade this year.
But they're playing an elite defensive line next week, and Carson Beck just. He's not going to create. I think we've made in the past Jared Goff comparisons, and that's what it has to be. If the environment is right, like it was last year, he'll be spectacular. And he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Right now, there's just this Georgia offense is incredibly concerning. I'll be honest, I don't think they can win a national title with this offense.
I don't think so either. And honestly, like the Goff comparisons I liked preseason. Now, like I said before, I think he's the Goff of college football. Where Goff, like in the NFL, needs an elite supporting cast, but in college, obviously at Cal, he didn't have that, and he was still great. Beck is the Goff of college football. Like, he needs an elite supporting cast in college football in order to succeed. NFL, who knows? I mean, he might need like the best supporting cast of all time in order to succeed in the NFL, like a San Francisco 49ers type supporting cast that Brock Purdy has. But even Brock Purdy is balling right now too. I don't even know I'm really just pessimistic on Carson Beck right now. I still think there's something there with him that I would take a flyer on in the day 2 of the NFL draft, but first round, I'm terrified of that guy right now. Absolutely.
No, I don't think he's not a first round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, I only think there's 2 guys in the country right now I'd say are first round picks, and he's certainly not one of them.
All right, so Dalton, we talk a lot about Georgia, and I will get into them at the very end as well. But what was the most impressive part of this Ole Miss victory?
The defense is obviously something, and you're going to get into a specific part of that. But you know what? I have to credit Ole Miss's quarterbacks, and there's a reason there's a plural on that. I'll start with Jackson Dart. Okay, look, it started as badly as it could have. We were watching early in this game. He throws the interception, and he gets his ankle turned while throwing it, and we're both like, this just became another Ole Miss Georgia game, right? Same old story, but. Came back from that interception, played well. When he was kept clean, he had an 82.6 grade in a clean pocket. 8 carries for 55 yards, gave him something on the ground. But I also want to point out the moment of this game, I should say, happened very early, right after that whole sequence where Jackson Dart throws an interception, a bad one, at his own 20-yard line. Turns his ankle. We're not sure if he's going to keep playing. Georgia scores a touchdown, of course, off it because they're going to, right? Austin Simmons, a redshirt freshman, comes in for one drive with Jackson Dart out, and he goes 5 for 6 with 64 yards and an 88 passing grade and led a drive that tied the game right after that whole sequence. And I think you could feel almost this – now, I don't know if they knew Dart was coming back or not, but you could feel this sense of relief where it was like, okay, maybe it's not the end of the world. Maybe we can do this, right? There was a belief. I think if Ole Miss makes the playoff, I think this one drive by Austin Simmons, who I think coming into the game only had 25 or 30 pass attempts in his career. He was getting mop-up duty all season in some of the blowouts they were playing. This one drive, I think, is going to be a huge catalyst for the rest of their season because it just got them. We both felt it because we knew Ole Miss' biggest problem in this game was the mental hurdle of just beating Georgia, right? I don't think we thought talent-wise they were worse than Georgia. I came on here and picked them to win and said, look, if you didn't know the logos on the helmets, you would think Ole Miss is the better team.
I only picked Georgia because of Kirby Smart.
Because they're Georgia.
The aura. Yeah. I was like, no, it's Georgia.
But there was something about that drive with a redshirt freshman backup quarterback coming in and playing well and leading that touchdown drive to tie the game after you got off to the single worst start you possibly could have. it just reset everything. And then Dart came back in and everything went the way. It's like for some reason they just started believing.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be crucial. That's why I have both quarterbacks in for this. I know it's just one drive from Austin Simmons, but that may have honestly been the biggest drive of Ole Miss season. When you consider now what they have the rest of the way, they should make the playoff.
I don't want to be hyperbolic. That could be one of the biggest drives for Ole Miss ever.
And it might seem minute. Because it's in the first quarter, it's like 6-7 minutes into the game. It's okay, it was only 7. All you did was tie the game 7-7. I don't think it can be overstated what that mentally did for that team. That kid going in there and playing how he did for that one drive and being prepared, and Lane Kiffin having him prepared in that situation against that Kirby Smart and that team, like you mentioned. I think it just took all of that pressure off of Ole Miss's shoulders, and they just said, you know what? Let's just play football now. We shouldn't be afraid of these guys.
Yeah, and honestly, I was surprised. So I know you're not a big recruiting guy, Dalton, but I was surprised because I knew Ole Miss's quarterback room had Austin Simmons and they had Walker Howard. I didn't know that. I'll admit firsthand, I did not know who the backup quarterback was when Jackson Dart got hurt. I thought it was going to be Walker Howard because Walker Howard is a year older than Austin Simmons, and Walker Howard was like a top 50 recruit in the country coming out of high school. He's like the number 6 quarterback in the country coming out. Simmons was more of like a top 20 quarterback in the country coming out of high school. So I just assumed because of recruiting that Walker Howard, being a year older, being a much more heralded recruit than Austin Simmons, I thought he was the backup quarterback. So when Austin Simmons came in, I was surprised by that. And I was like, all right, let's see what the kid's got. And like you said, that drive was massive by him. So obviously I understand recruiting rankings are not the end-all, be-all, but I just, knowing the recruiting background, thought that Walker Howard would be the guy. And Austin Simmons ended up being the backup quarterback, and he did an excellent, excellent job in that. So yeah, shout out to him. That was a critical drive for them. And honestly, they didn't score a touchdown there. Who knows what would have happened in this game, honestly, because that was big for their confidence. My most impressive part, though, going back to the defensive line, the edge defenders for Ole Miss specifically were dominating in this game. A 90.7 pass rushing grade combined for all of Ole Miss's edge defenders. Of their 14 pressures in this game, 13 of them came from their edge defenders. Princely Umanmielen, 2 sacks and 6 pressures on 27 pass rushing snaps. Jared Ivey, 2 sacks, 3 pressures on 31 pass rushing snaps. Suntaran Perkins, 1 sack, 4 pressures on 20 pass rushing snaps. So you had guys that had, 5 total sacks from those 3 edge defenders right there. And I mentioned before, it was a heavyweight battle between Georgia's offensive line and Ole Miss's defensive line. Whoever won that battle was most likely winning this game. And Ole Miss's defensive line really dominating on that. And I think that was a big reason why they held Georgia to 10 points and dominated this game.
It's the reason why, and it's the reason I would be worried about Georgia going into next week, going against James Pierce Jr. and all those guys that Tennessee has up front, because it does not get any easier. No, you talked about it. Umanmielen, one of the best transfer additions by anybody in the portal this year.
That would be a first-round performance.
Could be a first-round pick. Yeah, that could be a game that gets him into the first round. I know I just mocked that. I think it 31 overall. I mean, it's the additions they've made on their defensive line, and Jared Ivey's had a fantastic year too.
So
we need to talk about him more as well.
And Perkins too. Santaran Perkins has been really good too.
No, they're loaded. Their front seven's loaded. It's been the best part of their team all year, despite having a lot of weapons on offense and everything's always flashy with Lane Kiffin. Their front seven, Ole Miss front seven, has been the best part of their team this year, and it won them this game.
Isn't it insane, Dalton, that we have 3 weeks left of the regular season and Georgia is in win-out mode now? They have to win out. They cannot lose a game.
I think now losing next week, maybe it's not a death knell.
I think it's done. What are they going to do to make up for it? I mean, they're already probably on the outside looking in right now.
They're going to hope there's just more chaos around them.
Yeah, but I don't know if
they may be, because of the 3 losses that they'll have, Bama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. They may be the one team that they're going to make a case to be 9-3.
My only thing is and we'll get to the playoff bracket at the end, but as of right now, we don't have Georgia in the playoff. They lose to Tennessee, they're even further down. They have UMass and Georgia Tech left. What are they going to do to make up for it? I don't think I think they're screwed.
Tell you what, it's a good transition there, because Georgia Tech, we know they can beat anybody too, and we learned that yesterday as well, didn't we?
Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.